Despite their many differences, trains and trucks work together more often than you might think. No better is this exemplified than the practice of trailer-on-flatcar, or piggyback service. These hotshot trains fly across American main lines with high-priority freight and mail to keep warehouses full, store shelves stocked, and ultimately keep the country moving. But where and how did this unique practice get started? Moving freight by rail proved to be a huge improvement over relying on horses for essentially everything. However, that freight still had to be transferred and reorganized by hand from a rail car to horse-drawn wagons to get to its final destination. And guess what? That took up a lot of time. So someone, I'm not really sure who, it could have been Luigi for all I know, started thinking, what if we just move the loaded wagon by rail, and then we won't have to spend all this time repacking the freight?
Okay!
The concept was simple. Load a wagon onto a flat car, secure it with some rope, chain, spaghetti noodles, whatever they had available, move it by rail, then simply unload it for transport to its destination. While not a wagon or trailer, an early adopter of this piggyback practice was the Lehigh Valley Railroad in the 1840s, who moved sections of canal boats by rail as part of the Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania water service. P.T. Barnum's circus gave this concept a spin in the 1870s by loading wagons onto flat cars via ramps as the circus moved from city to city. In 1884, the Long Island Railroad began loading farmers' wagons onto flat cars, which were then put onto rail ferries for transport across the East River to Manhattan markets. As the 20th century rolled in, so did the automobile, and trucks became a persistent pain in the posterior for the railroads. With this new competition, railroads like the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee inaugurated their own trucking services in the 1920s and 30s to compete and handle less than carload freight. Their merchandise dispatch service began in 1926, loading their own trailers at Buena Yard in the north end of Chicago, becoming one of the first modern American examples of TOFC service. The North Shore later invited trucking companies to ship their trailers by rail at a lower cost than it would to go by road. And honestly, who could blame them, because most of the roads back then looked like they were put together by some kindergartners in a mud pit. Meanwhile, the Chicago Great Western was fumbling around with their second bout of bankruptcy. Despite their financial woes, they still managed to innovate, becoming the first railroad to initiate regularly scheduled trailer service in 1936, running between St. Paul, Minnesota and Chicago, Illinois, with the Granger Road then making a financial comeback in the 1940s. So you know what? Good for you, little buddy. Other railroads took note of this emerging trend and kickstarted their own trailer trains in the 1930s. After World War II, international commerce and technological advancements began to skyrocket, and a faster-moving world meant all forms of transit had to keep pace with the changing times. Canada's two biggest railways, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific, began moving trailers from coast to coast in the 1950s, and the Pennsylvania Railroad's iconic truck train service blazed the rails in 1954. Among the many manufacturers of these specialized flat cars was Pullman Standard, who coined the term piggyback service for marketing. From there on out, piggybacking became the new buzzword and trend for American and Canadian railroads. They moved their own trailers just as well as those from trucking companies, being advertised as an expedited service allowing companies to get their goods from coast to coast in record-breaking times. Even small towns had their own piggyback loading ramp. With all of these unique services, however, there was a need to standardize and provide a shared pool of flat cars at a low cost. In 1955, the Trailer Train Company was founded in cooperation with the Pennsylvania Railroad, Norfolk and Western, and Rail Trailer Corporation. A fleet of 500 75-foot flat cars hauling two standard 35-foot trailers were purchased from the Pennsy, and soon enough, 85-foot flat cars with trailer hitches became the new standard. Trailer Train would later go by a name I'm sure you're quite familiar with. That being TTX Company, who would go on to provide a nationwide railcar pool for American railroads, and still does to this very day. Kinda crazy how everything comes full circle, huh? So now that we've established what the standards are, how does the loading process work? Well, a duck walks up to a lemonade stand, a truck pulls up to a loading ramp and drops off the trailer on a flat car. Chains and/or a hitch then secures the trailer in place, the train gets on its way, the flat car is spotted in a siding, and then another truck picks up the trailer and brings it wherever it needs to go. Alternatively, cranes would be employed to load and unload flat cars. Yearly piggyback loads in 1955 totaled 168,150, but by 1964, that number exploded to 797,474. Semi-trailers were growing too, with 24 to 38 footers stretching out to 40 feet by 1959. Iconic services like Santa Fe Super C began in 1968, moving auto parts, electrical components, and mail over 2,000 miles between Chicago, Illinois, and Los Angeles, California in just 40 hours, a 15 to 35-hour reduction compared to conventional freight trains. It was dubbed the world's fastest freight train, averaging 58 to 63 miles per hour, topping out at 79. Interestingly though, the train only spanned 15 to 20 cars on average, but this was due to the service being an expensive express shipping option for customers. The Amazon Prime of freight trains, if you will. This ultimately led to its demise in 1976, as not enough shippers chose the premium 40-hour delivery option, and also the fact Union Pacific's competing Supervan service snatched up the mail contract. As is the case with most innovative and money-making ideas, the railroads copied each other's homework and launched their own express piggyback services, promoting them to the fastest and highest priority trains on the system, throwing other freights in the sidings to clear the line. Efforts were made to further streamline piggyback service with road railers, but that's a separate story you can learn about in this video I made a few years ago. New standards came about in the 1980s and 90s with the introduction of 89-foot-long flat cars, along with articulated spine car or front-runner variants meant to provide a smoother ride and reduce maintenance costs thanks to the cars sharing an axle and their minimal construction. 53-foot-long trailers were also approved for road and rail usage, and since then, things really haven't changed all that much, but piggyback traffic has seen a decline in recent decades. As the intermodal container train exploded in popularity throughout the 90s thanks to double stacking, a higher carrying capacity, and ease of transfer from one country to another thanks to global standardization, they simply proved to be a cheaper, faster, and more flexible alternative. That's not to say piggyback trains aren't a thing anymore, because they are, and quite frankly, they're the fastest freight trains in the US. Even if they're not trailers, piggyback rail service can be found all over the world, sometimes known as a rolling highway. Cranes are still loading and unloading trailers bound for distant lands, carrying all sorts of things you use every day. Piggyback's high-speed spirit is kept alive today as trailers charge down the main line on high-priority intermodal trains. Next time you see a train coming, stand back and hold on to your hat, because you never know when a piggyback train is on your track. Thank you to my channel members. Special thanks to Tommy Rosini, Amtrak Fan 19, Jacko Beans, The Warrior Cats Train Enthusiast, 281 Productions, Aspen, SM4, MRK8, The Etobicoke Railfan, and Railfan 1995 for subscribing to the Conductor tier. Your extra support always means a lot and goes a long way in helping me. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you in another video.